Michigan has 3 rivals. They beat rival 1 a few weeks ago, Notre Dame. Rival 3 will be coming up in a few weeks with Ohio State, which means we've got Michigan State right in the middle of this rivalry sandwich. As it comes back to sandwiches.
Always comes back to sandwiches.
You can't go wrong with food. Ashley Bastock from The Blade joins us now. And Ashley, we heard from Jim Harbaugh. He's not taking this Michigan State team lightly, although you would think perhaps they could based on the lack of success the Spartans have had the last couple of weeks. Michigan State coming off a very tough defeat to Illinois. But at least Harbaugh's saying all the right things, but we got to be on high alert because you never know what D'Antonio's going to pull off.
High alert was the phrase we heard a lot of on Monday, and also that D'Antonio is a master motivator as a head coach, that Michigan really feels like they have to be on their toes because it's a rivalry game, and because obviously Michigan State has their backs against the wall as far as their season is concerned. So, like you said, everyone kind of saying all the right things as it pertains to this rivalry, even though the Spartans are having a down year by their own standards.
And we have one of the great things about this rivalry, one of the great bon mots we got out of this rivalry came a few years back with Mike Hart referring to Michigan State as little brother, and on Monday, that kind of got brought up again.
Yeah, it did. Ambry Thomas was the one who brought it up again, said we got to show the little sister who the big brother is. So, and that even got revitalized last season, I believe, again at Big Ten Media Day after Devin Bush made some comments on social media. So, you know, they definitely are looking at it as that everyone on this Michigan team knows what this rivalry means, but especially a guy like Ambry Thomas, who was recruited by both schools. There was a nice little battle going on there when he was in high school. And of course, somebody like Aiden Hutchinson, who also talked on Monday, who's from Michigan, whose dad played at Michigan, who was an All-American at Michigan. So these players are definitely keenly aware of the importance of this rivalry. Again, even though Michigan State is having a down year, they don't want to be the highlight of their year. And Ambry Thomas said, you know, they're going to come out here and play like it's their Super Bowl, which another slight probably if you're a Michigan State fan or player. But, you know, they don't want to let Michigan State become the heroes in this year's game.
Well, and you go back to a year ago, what happened in this game. Obviously, we remember the beginning of, or before the game even began, with Michigan State walking across the field and kind of bumping into Devin Bush, and then we saw Donovan Peoples-Jones posing like the Paul Bunyan Trophy after a touchdown, and Michigan bringing the trophy out on the field at Spartan Stadium to celebrate. Mark D'Antonio, master motivator, so I'm pretty sure those images have been brought up to the Spartans this week.
Yeah, and Michigan got asked about them, of course, especially that little brouhaha at the beginning of the game last year. And, you know, Jim Harbaugh says that the rules say you can't be out in the field, no players out in the field 2 hours before, so they think, you know, there's not going to be another incident like that one in this year's matchup. But yeah, certainly there's all that off the field, if you will, fiery sort of stuff that carries off from on the field play.
So let's talk about on-the-field play. As the Michigan State Spartans, they did get a lot of yardage against Illinois, but they also turned the ball over quite a few times against Illinois. Brian Lewerke, your quarterback for the Spartans, and the way this Michigan defense has played the last month of the season, this could be a long day for Brian Lewerke and the Michigan State Spartans.
Yeah, and he had all 4 of their turnovers against Illinois, 3 interceptions and coughing up the ball once on a fumble. And, you know, we've seen this Michigan defense, this front 7, I think, has really come together this season. And Jim Harbaugh said on Monday there's no concern about their interior defensive line like maybe there was early in the year. But then you look at a game like Iowa is what I come back to, where Nate Stanley hadn't thrown an interception in like 700 passes, and Michigan got him to cough the ball up as many times as they did. So I think they'll be looking to, you know, make Lewerke make some of those same kind of mistakes that they got in some of those really solid defensive games they've had this year.
Have the Wolverines gotten their swagger back?
You know, I think they have, but it's kind of hard to say, right? Because, like, college football access is what it is. Like, we don't get to see them in practice. We really only get to see what's on the field and talk to them when they have their availability during the week, which is only 2 days for players. But I think this program just like feels different just from being around it, where especially after that Wisconsin game, it was so demoralizing, I think, in a lot of ways, the way that loss played out, because it was 35-14, but they were down 35-0 in that game. But ever since that second half of Penn State, things have just felt differently. I feel like they think things have just kind of been coming together, especially on the offensive end, where they maybe weren't early in the season when speed and space was introduced.
We finally saw this rushing attack get in gear against Notre Dame, a solid game against Maryland as well. And looking further ahead in 2020, that running back room should get a big addition back, as we found out on Monday that Chris Evans will return to the team come January in the winter term.
That's right. He's going to be re-enrolled at Michigan because he hasn't been in school since he was suspended with the academic issue he's been dealing with over the last year. So Jim Harbaugh said he had a meeting, and that Harbaugh's understanding is that he will be reinstated by the university. And once he is back in school, he will be back on the football team. So no kicking him off the team or anything like that, but that's what we know. And this is a guy who was going to be the #1 option, I think, at tailback coming into this year. He was Karan Higdon's backup last year, put up some pretty solid numbers over the last 3 years. So he'll definitely give them more depth in a room that I think really only Zach Charbonnet and Hassan Haskins this year have really broken out of. You've had Van Sumeren, Christian Turner, Entry getting all of those, their fair share of carries, but really those two are doing the lion's share of the work, and especially Hassan Haskins in recent games has really emerged. So Chris Evans will be back, definitely will give them some depth as long as everything goes according to plan.
Now, we talked a few weeks ago about there was a path for Michigan to get to Indianapolis in the Big Ten title game. A lot of things needed to happen. One of those is Penn State had to start picking up some losses. Well, lo and behold, Penn State lost at Minnesota. So again, that path, it's still a very narrow path for Michigan, but that path is still open.
Still open, and obviously emphasis on narrow with how Ohio State has been playing, even with Chase Young out last week against Maryland. But it still exists. So, until there's one game left in the season and either Penn State or Ohio State or both of them don't have more than 2 losses, then that path is still open for Michigan. But, they've stressed they are not thinking about that right now. There's a saying that they like to use this year, especially that the most important game is the next one, and that kind of has been said throughout the program.
And the next game for Michigan is Michigan State, and the question that's on a lot of people's minds, we talked about this last week with your colleague from the Blade, Kyle Rowland, this could be the final time we see Mark D'Antonio and Jim Harbaugh meet up at a Michigan State game, as there is a lot of heat under D'Antonio's seat, particularly after the loss to Illinois.
And it's ironic because I think after Chris Ash was fired at Rutgers, the coach that there was the most question surrounding was Lovie Smith at Illinois. But Illinois is bowl eligible now, and I don't think that anyone is questioning Lovie Smith's job security after this season. So, yeah, I think D'Antonio has the most fire, I guess, under his seat when it comes to Big Ten coaches so far. So it could be the end of an era, and obviously Jim Harbaugh would be hoping to go out on top if it is.
And part of the irony is that a month ago, Ash gets fired and said, well, Lovie Smith's got on the hot seat. Maybe the next coach on the hot seat would have been Jim Harbaugh following the loss to Wisconsin, the loss to Penn State. Now, Harbaugh, we neither one of us thought Harbaugh was really on a hot seat. And certainly he is not on a hot seat at this point. And there's so much for Michigan still to play. But all of a sudden, if you get D'Antonio out of there, that changes that whole dynamic where Mark D'Antonio is able to kind of ride a crest in Michigan State with the Rich Rod and Brady Hoke years where Michigan kind of was down a little bit, and D'Antonio was able to expose that and really build up the Michigan State program that, quite frankly, has not been the same since Jim Harbaugh's been in Ann Arbor.
Exactly, and obviously they had the college football playoff appearance, but since then I would argue that program really hasn't been the same, and Michigan has kind of, it feels like, been one step ahead. And granted, these two teams have gone back and forth in the Jim Harbaugh years. The away team has always won. It's kind of a weird anomaly. So that will be something to keep an eye on. If Michigan wins this game, it will be another first in the Harbaugh era.
And certainly Michigan would take some excitement, some glee over putting in that final nail in the D'Antonio coffin. I want to thank Ashley Bastock from the Toledo Blade for joining us this week, as once again we get you ready for the Michigan and Michigan State game. There'll be a high noon kick this Saturday in Ann Arbor.